Today I'm joined by Phillip Ehrmann from Jupiter, who's been talking to our delegates at the Morningstar Conference about China. Now, Phillip, I know there was a lot of questions for you there, obviously about growth. That's the big issue. Are there concerns there for you about China and sustainability of growth there? What's your view?
China obviously over the last 10 years has had an extraordinary progress. Real GDP has grown by over 11% on an annualized basis, and that, to my mind, and indeed the governments in China, is clearly unsustainable. In documents covering the next 5 years and indeed going up to 2030, they're looking for a more orderly level of growth which can be sustained. There are obviously things that will need to be done, continue to reform the economy, open up to global trading partners, but I'm comfortable that China can deliver. And in fact, the tightening that we saw last year to rein in growth, which was in danger of running ahead of itself, is probably at it was at its peak at the end of last year, and we're probably seeing, as tends to be the case with reported statistics, the worst of it right now. And if the worst of it ends up being in the second quarter with growth of around 7–7.5%, I think we'll all be quite happy with that.
One of the other sectors that a lot of the delegates wanted to ask about was the banking sector, and I know that's an area you, like a lot of managers, have been looking at. What are your sort of observations on that? Is it a real area for concern?
Well, the problem with China in terms of the stock market is that the financial sector is a very large component. The 5 or 6 very big banks dominate the financial space. Unfortunately, over time in the past, and as likely as not for the foreseeable future, they remain organs of the state. They will do what they're told. They tend to provide loans to state-owned enterprises. The good news is state-owned enterprises are now much better run, and therefore these loans are not as imperiled as they were in the past. Over time, this will change, and we certainly see signs that 1 or 2 of them are beginning to branch into lending to small and medium-sized enterprises, consumer lending, all the right kind of things. I mean, in our portfolio, we're looking for specialty financial companies that are beginning to come to the market that have niches and have an edge over these big monoliths. So you have to pick your way, but in terms of the overall health of the banking system, I'm actually quite comfortable that it's in reasonable shape at the moment.
And you mentioned a group called the Magnificent Seven of sort of sectors or companies there. I mean, can you just explain a bit about
Well, these are the emerging strategic industries that were the centre part of the 12th five-year plan. They're very much sectors that we take for granted in the West. They would relate to fuel efficiency, environmental controls, things that would degrade or affect your ability to grow your economy. They also relate to things like healthcare and education. Once again, better social services provided to a wider number of people not only improves social cohesion, which is good for politics, but it also will increase the propensity to consume, because most Chinese save a lot of money because they're worried about getting sick and dying, or educating their prince or princess. So these are things that are central, but once again, we're very familiar with because we've seen them in other developing economies and indeed our own world.
And just finally, I know you touched on the political situation there. We've got the 18th Party Congress happening later in the year, and one of the questions was, do you have any concerns about, something that the government might do which could affect the investment case for China, or I know you mentioned maybe spending too much as being in the past a bit of an issue, but are there any issues going forwards that you see on the back of this conference?
Well, I think the big surprise actually is that the transition will be very, very smooth, particularly given what has happened in the last few months around Bo Xilai, who was governor of Chongqing, who was trying to make a push for one of the top 9 jobs. He very much was slapped down in the most extraordinary series of events, but there was a growing disquiet as to his behavior, because he was very much developing the cult of the individual, which was running really counter to the way Chinese politics has evolved. It's become much more consensual, and as a result, the president and prime minister, I won't say elect, but likely to be anointed, have already been part of the standing committee of the Politburo for the last 5 years, and have been architects of the growth that we've seen and indeed going forward.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you.